related to neurological sciences. And the panel will be led by Professor Kavita Vemuri. She's a faculty at IIIT Hyderabad and did a research from IIIT Hyderabad itself. She is into various kinds of research, which includes some of the most interesting ones are she designs and develops games also, computer games also.
Thank you. So thanks to the organizers for actually having a panel discussions on neuroscience and clinical data. So, so all of you are students here from same college or different colleges? 4 colleges, oh okay. So is attendance mandatory for you guys? It's counted? Counted? Then where are the missing guys? No attendance today. They're having lunch, okay. So we also follow attendance mandatory, so I will count after some time. So welcome all of you. So we're going to, all of you are engineering students? No biotechnology, okay. So if you have any questions on any of the terminologies, please raise your hands. We have medical doctors here who can answer questions for you. So please do ask questions because then the panel discussion makes some sense. So before I introduce all the panelists, I just want to kind of go through a few slides which will kind of set the tone, the first slide only. What is the focus of this panel? What we want to do is, we actually want to talk about data that is required for neuroscience research and all the interventions that can happen. If you have data, we can actually get solutions, and solutions basically means interventions. The format and standards for data, that means do we actually have, we have to follow proper formats because all data has to be portable. That means what I actually save here, collect here, should be used by any researcher across the world. Clinical and medical ethical clearances, we won't touch a lot about it. All of us follow these anyway at our institutional levels. Collaborations, most important. How can clinical practitioners and researchers, and most important, students like you, get involved in doing research? How can we form collaborations, right? And interventions I mentioned. And also, we'll talk about a 360-degree understanding of the brain and body functioning. So this would be the format of the discussion, both at the panel level and any questions that you have. But before I actually go into giving you a little bit of insight into the different subsets of neuroscience, I would like to invite the panel members, Dr. Sujit from NIMHANS, Bangalore, Dr. Rashmi Gandhi is a consultant neuro-ophthalmologist from Center for Sight, and Dr. Ambuj from ICICI Knowledge Park and also a neurosurgeon. So like all of you, I'm also very lazy. I didn't do my homework of actually getting their bios written down. So I'm doing the best thing that I can do. I'm asking them, please, can you please introduce yourselves?
So I'm Dr. Sujitesh. I'm an additional professor in NIMHANS, Bangalore. I essentially work on stroke and sleep. And I have a long collaboration with Dr. Bapi Raju, and he is who invited me. Thank you for inviting me. And what else? I did my graduate MD DM neurology from All India Institute, Delhi, and my graduation from Calicut Medical College. Now I've been working in NIMHANS for the last 5 years.
Thank you, Dr. Kavita, for this very kind invite. My name is Rashmi Gandhi. I'm an eye surgeon, but my further specialty is neuro-ophthalmology. So 35% of the brain is one way or the other related to the eye, or eye movement or vision. So that's the area of interest that I'm working on, and I've been collaborating with Professor Kavita on a lot of those issues. I practice at Banjara Hills at Center for Sight. I did my training from Shankar Netralaya and from Royal College of Surgeons, Edinburgh and Glasgow.
Thank you. So I'm the odd man out here. My name is Dr. Amit Chaturvedi. I'm a senior vice president with IKP. IKP is erstwhile ICICI Knowledge Park. It is one of the largest healthcare accelerators and incubators in the country. I'm also on the board of directors for the investment committee. My journey started off as a clinician. So I started off as a neurosurgeon. Then I decided to do my MBA and moved on to the dark side, to the corporate world. Spent the next decade with companies like Johnson & Johnson, where I was leading commercial roles in strategy. And then moved into Medtronic, where I was heading R&D. So a neurosurgeon who's half an engineer, who was working with 230 engineers on 23 different projects, trying to look at how to build better medical devices. Post that, I joined IKP about 3 years back. It was just before the COVID pandemic. And here, on the one side, I look at mentoring startups. So we're looking at startups in the healthcare space. We're funding them, we investment. So I run 3 different investment vehicles within IKP. And on the other side, we work as a think tank for the Niti Aayog and for the PMO, the Prime Minister's Office, specifically on digital health interventions. So the NDHM, the NDHE, the entire piece around Ayushman Bharat, all of that in varying forms, we along with our collaborators work on looking at the health policy side. So yeah, so that's a brief about myself.
Thank you. So, because most of you are not from the medical or biology side, I'll just quickly go through a couple of slides. So I'm just going to, the slide deck is to just to kind of give you a brief idea about the different subtopics or subdomains in neuroscience. Neuroscience is very wide. So we have translation and clinical neuroscience. It actually relates to diseases, right? So neuroscience is all about understanding how the brain as a organ works, right? All of you kind of know that. It tests theories of disease progression and the aim is to develop novel strategies. So you must have actually, if you go to get yourself an MRI scan. How many of you have got an MRI scan done? Brain scan? No. Okay. All of you can sign up. We have some experiments going on. You can all be participants for our experiments. So neurological disorders, there are different kinds. I won't go into all of them. Some of you must have heard the word dementia. Have you heard the word dementia? What is it about? Memory, right? Yeah, good. Then there are, of course, psychological conditions. What are they? Heard of mental health, stress, depression? Some of them, not all of them, okay? So you have a lot of neurological disorders. Not some of them here can also be something that is neurodevelopmental. That is some conditions that we born with, some conditions that we get as we grow older, right? Neurodegeneratives. Then we have the neuro disorders or development to age. That means from the time you're born to as we age. So there's disorders that can set in at the cognitive level. There's motor disorders that we have. Then we have, of course, seizures because of that, and we have behaviors. So I'm also giving you references. I'll share the deck with Dr. Raju, and he can share it with you. So you guys don't have to take pictures of it. Unless you're taking a selfie, that's fine. Then we have cognitive science and neuroscience, which is a basic core research area here. So we are interested in looking at everything as how the brain functions. So all of you, most of you must be bilingual, right? You know 2 languages, 3 languages? Yes? So have you ever asked yourself, how come you know so many languages? How do I learn language? When did I learn language? How do I learn language? How do I store all these things? So these are very interesting topics for all of us. Not just in the higher cognition level, how do I make a decision to take a bet, not take a bet, okay? We also have a core in clinical conditions, but cognitive science basically deals with a lot of higher order cognition, memory, learning. And what you're seeing, these pretty pictures on the side, these are actually the brain scanning done with different kinds of modalities, and the coloration basically shows some signal changes. Then you have cellular and molecular neuroscience. This you must have heard of. So this actually goes into the details about the cell part of the neuron. Then you have the ions. How do these ions, what is their role in a synapse? So there are cell and molecular neuroscientists who actually look at that level. All of you have heard neurons, right? Heard the word neurons? Yes? Yes. Okay. Then we have computational neuroscience. So this area of work basically builds these models, right? They take all the sometimes data that comes from experimental work, sometimes data that's from theoretical work, understanding of how the neurons fire, and then they go ahead and build large models. These models can also be used to explain how we perform certain cognitive tasks. We have systems neuroscience. This is kind of new, but it's very similar in terms of your computational. But here you identify how neurons form networks, large networks, functional networks as we call it. So you can see these pictures on the right-hand side. The last one basically would be a full network. All these connections basically say what are the areas of the brain which are connected to do a simple task. Right? All of you are paying attention to the slides? Yes? Okay, so you're doing a cognitive task now. Now people who are working in attention will tell you, okay, what are the areas which would be supporting this attention? Okay? If halfway through you're also dreaming, that's also another network. Have you ever asked yourself how you dream? How many of you dream in black and white or in color? In color? Oh, all of you are colorful. All color, oh, new movie techniques. Black and white? Have you asked yourself how you can dream in color when your eyes are closed and you know sensory input is coming? Where in the brain is these images forming? So those are the questions you should ask yourself, and those are the answers people who are working in cognitive neuroscience, neurosciences, trying to answer. Of course, dreams is an expensive research area to get funds for, but still, you can dream about it. Forensic neuroscience is new. It's basically trying to link some of the deviant behaviors that we see to underlying neurological conditions. For example, this is PET scans. This is actually a paper. And you can see the difference between somebody who's a deprived murderer to non-deprived murderer and to a normal control. So this area of forensic neuroscience people actually scan and they are trying to understand where exactly deviant behavior starts, right? People who are serial murderers, rapists, it's interesting to know why they do and what in the brain, is there any difference at the brain level? Not only at the brain level, but related. There's another area which has come up which is very interesting to read. All of us who eat and like food and different kinds of food, the neuroscience of the gut. This is interesting because they're trying to link what happens in the gut. What is a gut? Anyone? And nobody else has answers? She gets full attendance. Yeah. So the gut bacteria to the brain. So they're trying to make this entire link. Is there a link between what you eat, what you feel, what your hormones, chemicals are to what your brain functions? Yes? Okay. So it's interesting to actually see the link that they're doing. Health neuroscience, it's the interplay between brain and the physical health over the lifespan. So they're now looking at everything, stress, emotion, obesity, physiological parameters, okay? The whole thing. So it's not just this 1.3 kg mass, but it's the entire body and how it actually helps function or disrupts the functioning of the brain. And so I always like to show this. So you can actually see the difference between an alcoholic, I'm not getting my cursor, but you can see the two on the right-hand side. You can see the area in the cerebellum, that's a scan. The cerebellum is the one with the ring, it's marked with the ring. You can see the difference between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic control. And you can see the difference in Alzheimer's disease and the brain of a person with alcoholism. So alcohol, substance abuse, all these things actually do have a significant effect on your brain. there's a good number of studies out there that you should actually have a look. Okay? So what is it that we can do with all this learning? The question that you can ask is, okay, so you've done all this, there are different topics, there are different areas of research. What is it that we can do? We need solutions, right? Any of you can identify one or two major medical problems, medical or clinical problems that you are aware of, that you think that require solution? Somebody in your family, somebody in your extended family. Diabetes, yes. Anything else? Blood pressure? Cancer? Anything else with the brain? Brain tumors, then? Have you any other conditions that you've seen older people? Memory loss, Alzheimer's, anything else? Stroke? Paralysis? Yes? Do you want to find solutions for them? Or do you want anybody to find a solution for them? Yeah. So the idea here is if we can actually bring everybody, engineers, medical practitioners here, scientists like us, and then find a solution, right? The solution can be anything. For any one of those conditions, there might be different kinds of solutions. So I just put one I got a nice picture of. It is neuroprosthetics. Many people are working on it here. So this is just work in my lab. We look at stroke, look at empathy. It's complex, I won't go into it. And we are also looking for neuromarkers for clinical conditions. We did spine kinematics, that is how our spinal cord, actually the range of motions, the angular momentums, and as a function of both our postures, our sitting, our obesity, our BMI index, our waist to hip ratios and all. All this is data. Spine kinematics and stroke are pretty much data intensive. We are doing a lot of data at this time. We also have a small research on behavioral finance, where we are looking at decision making and risk attitudes. Others in the group at Cognitive Science Center, I must have missed a few topics, so please don't mind. Mental health, Dr. Priyanka, Dr. Bhakti, and Dr. Vinu. Stroke and sleep disorders, Professor Bapi is working, and he works on other areas too, computing, neural computing. Music in the brain, Dr. Vinu looks at it not just from understanding how we look at music, how we process music, but it's also about whether music can be used as a therapy. Memory and learning, Dr. Vishnu, who was here till now, and he's also into neuroinformatics. And we also do a lot of collaborations with speech and language groups of the institute, basically to understand, what can we use from people who have developed these speech tools for patients. So what is the critical requirement? As a country, we need standardization, we need data formats, we need protocols. Lot of us are doing really interesting work. Is India a great place to do a lot of research? Yes? Medical research? How many of you have visited a government hospital? Okay, what do you see? What's the very first thing that catches your eye when you go in? One of you? Multiple brains talking at a time, it's like that cocktail problem. One of you. What do you see when you go to a government hospital? Less hospitality. Anything else? Low maintenance, pretty much yes. So anything else about patients and doctors? Number of patients. Yeah. Okay. So you see, but do you really, do we need good government hospitals? Yes. Right? So what do we have to do? Improve infrastructure, help them also, help doctors, make assistive systems so that they can actually see a lot more patients. Of course, that's not something that we want to give them as this one, but help them actually spend qualitative time with the data, right? So we also need a lot of pre-registration of studies. I know this is of not so much of interest to you, but this is something that I really would want to see, that we register our studies before across the country so that everybody knows what are the studies going on. We need actually dedicated clinical and medical researchers. Here, most of you are engineers, so I don't know. We also, of course, need facilities. There's nobody here with money, so I'll skip that point also. And we need an auditing and validation committee. That means it's very important that clinical data is to be validated properly. All of you, some of you might become entrepreneurs. Please remember something. When you're doing a product for a clinical, for any intervention, it has to go through proper clinical audit, okay? It's nice to get that small Times of India report for 15 minutes, but what it requires is a lot more patience than actually building a like button in Facebook or for working for Elon Musk. And we need to go through this process of research, development, and impact. And this is one of the suggestions. This is a very recent paper, 2016 paper itself, but they're trying to do this. This picture is extremely complex, but it is a data storage format that has been proposed. Actually, if you look at it, it's a complete data structures, data architecture, software engineering problem statement. It involves what is the kind of protocols we measure, what kind of data we collect from the patients, and how to link all these things to keep it so that indexing is easy. This is not about storing the data only, it's about actually indexing. Suppose I'm collecting a data in Hyderabad, a doctor somewhere in Northeast should be able to say, okay, I got this patient, I want to see if somebody else has got a similar condition. And they should be able to actually index it and search for it. So we need this. There are a lot of challenges, but are also opportunities in India. We have a lot of diversity. For cognitive neuroscience people, language, it's the most important thing. It's also a very interesting thing. How can we all be so multilingual? Medicines, we have different kinds of medicines that we use. Ayurvedic, allopathic, homeopathic. What are the effects of it? Diseases, of course, some of them are very maybe specific to India, some may not. Lifestyle, is our lifestyle different than what it is in the Western world? Same? No. What is different? What? Food habits. Anything else? Culture. How we actually do things. Okay. Food is different. Is our thought process different? Why? Somebody said yeah. Why is our thought process different to the Western world? No, I want an answer. There's no... my look on the face is not a smile, it's a smirk, that's all. It's a constant thing of my face. Is the thought process different? Somebody said yes. Why? Okay. Keep that thought and I'll ask you again at the end. So, when we collect data, the most important takeaway from this panel discussions would be that we need to actually get a 360-degree data. That means it's not just adult brain or an old brain, basically senior this one, but we need to understand everything, right from nutrition, mother's nutrition, all the way to genetics, epigenetics, social family interactions, infections, exposure to time. All these are required for us to actually make any inferences about the data we collect from any of these modalities. Okay? So we won't go into what are all those EEG, MEGs and all. Some of you must have heard of it, so we won't go into it. That's what we're going to discuss today. Okay? So the focus, I just put this same slide again. I'll leave the slide on. And I'm going to start off, like any one of you can take over the discussion. So I finished my part of my class. All awake? Brain awake? Okay, now is thought different than the Western world? Yes? Why? AI thought is different. Oh my God. You made my day. Okay, so who wants to go first? Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. That was a very nice presentation. And just to set the tone, let me first start with importance of data and how it has already changed some of the things that we do in our hospital. and how you all can contribute to change it even further. So I see a lot of you are wearing glasses. I'm sure you would have gone to an eye surgeon or an eye clinic, right? So what happens when you go to an eye doctor or go to an eye clinic? What kind of checkups that you've undergone? Little loudly. You would have gone to the eye doctor or eye clinic, right, to check your glasses? So what they would have done? Vision check, yes. Anything else? A check for the glasses? Yes. Then somebody would have put the outside, they would have put the eye drops, and then would have checked with a very bright light. Right? So what we do when you put the drops is to check the inside portion of the eye. Inside the eye there is a structure called retina. And the drops are being put so that we can examine the retina. Now retina is exactly the structure and the function of retina is like brain. It is also a circuit like the brain, the way it functions circuit. Now why I brought this about in today's discussion is that Google did a very large study. They looked at the retina images from India, in fact from south of India, and they did a lot of analysis, machine learning, AI, and now just by looking at those images, the software is able to predict whether that person has diabetic related change in the eye or no diabetic related change in the eye, blood pressure related change or no blood pressure related change, is there any abnormality in the retina? And it went on and on. Now I've heard that just by looking at the retina, the software can tell whether that particular photograph of the retina is of male or female, what kind of food habits that person might be having. And as a joke, my friend keeps telling that just by looking at the retina now, the Google software will be able to predict whether you will vote for Narendra Modi or you will vote for Rahul Gandhi or you will vote for Arvind Kejriwal. And I don't know how far, I mean, they probably tell it in a jest, but the importance here is that just by looking at the retina, the software is able to predict a lot of things. Importance for us, it can tell us whether this particular person, what are the percentages or what is the chance that he would develop a heart problem a little later in life? What are chances that he'll develop a brain problem a little later in the life? So that's the importance of data in medical science and a neuroscience. So I thought I'll set it rolling. You would have to say something, Ambuj, on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. And in fact, because we deal with a lot of startups across in the ecosystem, a lot of them are actually working towards this. The only trends that we are seeing now is that startups are talking about integrating their data coming in from multiple sources. So for example, in mental health disorders, there are startups that initially were working on vitals monitoring, which is heart rate, pulse rate, respiratory rate, heart rate variability, HRV and all. Then they realized that image analytics is one area where we've kind of, as an ecosystem, we've kind of gained some sort of expertise. Which mean, and what does it mean? It means that, you know, with a cam, looking at your face, getting inputs from facial features and contours, you are able to predict. There is a predictive accuracy. Currently, these solutions are working around 60% accuracy, but that's almost like flipping a coin. But they are progressing fast. The third set of data that came in from plethysmography. So you can measure your BP. Now you have 3 different sets of data coming in. One is the electrical activity of the heart, the other is the vascular activity, the circulatory activity, and the third is, you could say the facial muscle activity, but that is heavily influenced by your emotions. Now you combine these 3. And this is where a couple of startups in Telangana right now are working. One of them, I'm actually working with them closely, so I agree. The point that you made, 360-degree collection of data from all across is actually a reality. A lot of these startups are also starting to combine. So wearables now is the entire industry of wearables today is now moving steadily towards saying we're not going to look at individual parameters. We're going to look at a group of parameters and then find correlations, which is where a lot of work, a lot of opportunities for data scientists and data engineers would be coming in the future. So those would be my points on what you said. Over to you, Doc.
So one important issue in biomedical researches is that the false discovery rate in biomedical research is quite high. If you look at the exact sciences, there have been papers from workers who study research do research on research, like Stanford, there's a person called John Ioannidis. He's saying that at least 70% of the data from biomedical literature are false. Because what happened is that these are done on small data sets and it is not really standardized, and the researcher has an urge to get a positive result. You get published only if it is positive. So what happened is that the positive results are published more often than negative results. So what happened? You have a population, in the entire literature there is an overpopulation of positive results which may not be replicated. So the non-reproducibility of results in biomedical, this is a very peculiar program in biomedical literature. So there the issue of pre-registration, multiple things like data auditing, pre-registration of study protocols. So if you are doing a study, you need to register it and say that this is what I'm going to do. Because what happens is that if you do not register your clinical study, what happens is that you may change it. At the midway, you change the protocol, and whatever results you get, positive, you publish it. So that is a major protocol deviation. This occurs multiple times, and that's the reason why in biomedical literature, this false positive results is very often. So that's the importance of having a pre-registration of data sets. Also auditing. You need to have an independent audit of data sets. Otherwise, what happens is that smaller studies, smaller research groups, they publish positive results more often than what they get negative. So unless these kind of things, 360-degree, documentation of data, pre-registration, and auditing of data is done, biomedical researchers generally will remain the same. So this kind of tolerance of false discoveries is very, very high in biomedical literature. So that's why you have proliferation of publications. On the contrary, in exact sciences like physics and all, a discovery, if it is considered to be false, in fact, the community's tolerance, the community's tolerance of false discoveries is very low in physics and many other exact science disciplines. So this is a very important problem. So here comes the importance of pre-registration of protocols, auditing of data, and 360-degree data collection.
Just for you, Dr. Sujit, I think how many of you sleep 7 hours or 8 hours a day? Oh, not bad. Are you just saying it because I'm asking the question? How many of you sleep less than 4-5 hours a day? Okay. Not many. It would have been the opposite for our students here. So you work on sleep disorders. What could be some of that they should be actually aware of in terms of sleep, the circadian rhythm in the brain? Just this is for their knowledge, long-term knowledge.
So sleep as a discipline has emerged. Okay, sleep as a discipline, as a medical discipline emerged in the last maybe 2 decades. So what happened is that the data sets on sleep, the evidence by which you can recommend how many hours you need a healthy sleep is not very clear. So whatever data emerged is based on expert opinion. So expert opinion, you need to sleep at least 7 to 8 hours, and your sleep should be according to the circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is a 24-hour clock which happens in every cells of the body, but it is regulated by a nucleus called suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. So what happens is that when you have when as the day progresses, your sleep pressure increases, and at that point in time, a hormone called melatonin is released by 8 o'clock or something, and then you start to sleep. So your circadian rhythm should coincide with your sleep time should coincide with the circadian rhythm which is occurring in the body. So and this is also entrained with the the daylight cycle. So if you are sleeping in the morning hours and sleeping and awake in the light hours, the whole system will get deranged, and that will also adversely affect your cardiovascular function, also your immune function. So a healthy sleep essentially means 6 to 8 hours of sleep, and that should be entrained to the natural cycle, the daylight cycle. So you should sleep in the night and not in the morning.
Can I chip in a little bit in this? See? So people who are not sleeping, one thing to be on the lookout for is to stay away from your gadgets, your phones and iPad. Why is that? Is because in the eye, there are two types of switches, or they are called receptors. One is rods, which function when there is dark, another is cones, which function when there is light. So if you keep feeding light to your eyes, the brain will think that it's a daytime and you don't have to sleep right now. I mean, there is a little breakage of what he mentioned about circadian rhythm. So it's a real issue with a lot of people. When they continue to work on the gadget just before the sleep, the brain might be confused, and that might be one of the reasons why you may not be able to sleep fast.
I'll just add one point. So my previous two panelists talked about the clinical side. Let me talk to you about the business side. How does it work? So a lot of people don't sleep properly. Great. That's a business opportunity for researchers, innovators, prospective innovators like you at some point of time. So there is a startup, you might want to Google it, not now. It's Dozy. IKP invested into it, we made our money on our exit. This startup started focusing on sleep monitoring. The way it works is they have a pad, which is a non-contact monitoring mechanism. It uses the concept of ballistocardiography, which is basically your chest wall has vibrations when your heart beats, and so therefore those vibrations are converted into secondary data, and you can actually come in and look at, so you get heart rate, heart rate variability and a host of factors. It gives, and you put this pad under your mattress, it doesn't touch you. Okay? Tremendous opportunity. Next, when COVID came in, they started combining data on temperature and SpO2 onto this device. It was used for a different purpose. Today, this company is sitting at a 300 CR valuation. What are they going into next? They are now combining this data with EEG monitoring, 4 to 8 electrode, depending on what the different technologies are. And they're realizing that this is a bigger game. This is where your future. So how will this move next? Once you started combining cardiac activity, psychological activity, and brain activity, you're going to go next into saying, okay, can we solve this problem? Can we bring in behavior modifications so that people sleep better? Can we look at therapeutic interventions? I think this is where you start to, as students, you need to start thinking, over the next 5 years, the entire research and the entire opportunities are going to be in area. Sleep is going to be important. All of us are losing sleep. That's a big opportunity for some.
So that was your free consultation.
I just have a point. Actually, this DOSI, we want to do that study. So we were trying to validate DOSI, wanted DOSI with a Fitbit devices with polysomnography and a short-term cognitive outcome. So then what happened is that, so the DOTI essentially developed as a sleep monitoring, so that then the advertisement was a sleep quality assessment. So then we wanted to validate this device with the Fitbit and polysomnography and short-term cognitive outcome. So then what happened, DOSI's research head came to us. He said that essentially these device was not really validated. They didn't clinically validate it. So they didn't give us, so that they want to validate it now. So essentially what happened, this is what I'm saying, the false discoveries in biomedical sciences. What happened is that small studies they don't do validation in a big cohort, and they advertise in Amazon and all is advertise as a quality of sleep monitoring. In fact, what we found is that all the devices which is claiming, like Fitbit and many other devices are there, none of these things are clearly validated to assess sleep quality.
They are not.
Yeah. So what happened? Our conclusion is that these are entertainment devices. Essentially, these are kind of in US, it's like the US market. These are considered to be entertainment, not a medical grade devices. So that's a problem in startup industries and all. No, they don't really validate. If they're very robust clinical, and they just come into a market without having that kind of, and they claim it also. Brilliantly
put. So at IKP, what we're trying to do to mitigate this is we're trying to build something called as an evidence lab. Yeah. Now, what is an evidence lab? It's basically all your digital health solutions that are created by entrepreneurs, and then you have the clinicians out here saying this is not validated. The evidence lab will do that. And so the idea here is to take those technologies, test them within the market, test them for medical grade, test them for consumer grade as well. The bigger market is on the consumer side. See, one of the things that I can do is I can talk a doctor's language, I can also talk a business language. So I see both the sides. My point is to wait for a solution to reach the epitome of perfection. Until then, just hold it there. is a tremendous cost on the ecosystem. And so therefore, the strategic way is to then start opening it up to smaller segments and then moving it further. But I agree with your point. They need validation.
Yeah.
So, how many of you wear the smart watches which tell you what's your BP, what's your walking? How many of you? All of you keep checking to see how many steps you took? What's your heart rate now? Yes? Okay. So what do you do with that data? Have you downloaded that data and actually put it in some Excel sheet and then look to see what's how the data changes between night and day and no? So that's exactly what you guys should be doing. That's where research starts. When you ask the questions, you're wearing something, it is collecting something, it's collecting your heart rate, it is collecting your movement data. You can download the data and then see what changes for you, right? So I think that should be the questions you should ask for research as a research topic. So before we go to the next round of us talking, I want questions from your end. Anybody? Yes. Question? Yes.
You said that when you start phone, the brain will think that is quantity, so that's why it will get sick. Right? But what happens in my life is, when the semester exams release comes, I will do some kind of slide notes. So by reading online videos, then automatically get I am sleeping.
Yeah. Well, that problem we all face. The problem that I was trying to make was people who don't sleep. It's not for everybody. People who don't sleep, one of the reason can be this, that your rods and cones are confused now, is it day or night? But one of the solution, now you're provided a solution. Okay, if you're going to look at the mobile, pass on the books that you're reading when you're sleeping, and we all will read those books so that we can sleep. So it's not that it's universal. As he was mentioning, physics is an exact science. Why biology is not an exact science is because all of us are different. We are not the same. Our makeup is different. So when you say if you have a problem, then you say this is a possibility that you might be facing a problem. That does not mean that the same factor will cause a problem in you or in me. Getting my point?
I'll give a different perspective. So one of the things that happened with me was, my first half of my avatar was into medical education. Then when I went for MBA, and when you go for an MBA, most of them are engineers. So you see their lifestyle. So there are very few people who have this admirable routine that you have of reading, before sleeping. Most of them I used to find, at that time it used to be Counter-Strike. I don't know what it is right now. And so therefore when you get up in the morning with groggy eyes, it's very clear because your assignment deadline used to be 8 a.m. 7:55, they were all around the Xerox machine trying to get it out. So, but that's a good problem to have if you have. But I doubt whether that's a common problem. I think he was one of the rarer reads.
Any other questions? I want some questions from all of you. Do you have any question which says, so what can we do? Any of you want that answer to that question? So, okay, all this is nice. All of you are saying we need to do this. What can we do? Yes? Okay, so I'll pose that question to the panelists because all of you are engineers, right? Computer science? Electrical and electronics? All computer science? Okay. AI also?
They are our students, external students for modern machine learning.
Okay. So, so tell me, those who are doing machine learning and AI, you actually heard a few comments from the panelists, plus you looked at the slides. Where does these two streams fit in? I'm trying to wake you guys up. I see many of you are nodding off, so I'm trying to get the class up. Where do you see this stream fitting? AI, ML into neuroscience. Pattern recognition. Anything else? Image processing. Anything else? Recognition. Data pre-processing. Analysis is very wide a term. Interpretation. So you guys will all work with all these things in all these areas? Okay. So now they have given you a set of bag of words. Where does this bag of words fit into our entire agenda in neuroscience of trying to get a data format, try to get data out in a way in which they all can actually run these analysis for us?
So I'll give you perspective, and I'll give you two examples. One is going to be a larger case study, and the other will be a quick one on a startup. Let's go for the larger case study. Let's start me. So I'll start off with a statement. To get one neuroscience drug in the market, it takes you 10 to 15 years, and on an average, $2.6 billion. I repeat, it takes $2.6 billion and 10 to 15 years to get one neuroscience drug into the market. And why would that be? Because there are direct costs involved, there are indirect costs involved, there are cost of failures. You have 1,000 candidates, you only get about 100 to fit the characteristics you need. Out of those 100, only 10 qualify for human trials, and only one is the so-called blockbuster molecule that comes in. Now, imagine if you have a $2.6 billion spend on a drug to just get it there, how much more will it take to take it to the market? Now, what would be the ROI or the return on investment expectations of the industry major who has developed this drug? Now realize what will be the implications on the pricing of this drug. And so therefore, the reason why you get innovation is not cheap. This is the reason. As engineers, because for me, engineers are problem solvers. So as engineers, the way for you to think then is, how can we reduce the cost of development of this drug? How can we get this $2.6 billion down? And there are multiple angles. Of course, that will require a masterclass to understand how drug development happens. But broadly speaking, some of the key challenges that we have in the drug discovery area are, the first one is limited understanding of your target molecule. So for example, every drug gets in and targets onto a specific area, onto a specific molecular structure. That leads to a cadence of reactions that happen within the body. That is the entire pathway, which leads to an outcome. Right? Now, unless you know the target, and which is very difficult in neurosciences for multiple reasons, you then start hitting multiple targets. Now that is a cost, because only one of them is going to be successful, but you will need to go through 100,000, maybe 10,000 targets. AI/ML is being deployed there. So the way it works as someone said, pattern recognition, AI/ML looks at the entire set of data, historic data, looks at the kind of outcomes that were achievable in the lab, and then correlates that and starts reducing that gap. That's one application. The other would be patient selection. So I was talking to these guys. So I also consult Microsoft on cybersecurity. They're also a group of 700 engineers sitting out of the IDC out here. And one of the conversations, I said, what will a neurosurgeon talk to engineers on cybersecurity? I said, I'll tell you about a biological system called the human immune system. And at the end of that 2-hour talk, they were like, we can learn more from the human immune system because it's evolved over millions of years. Cybersecurity systems are like that. But the way AI/ML can help there is, this idea came to me from the Microsoft folks. So they said, when we look at our endpoint management is what they call it. They said, from you have laptops, you have machines all across there. You still need to, they still have mechanisms to have anonymized data on usage patterns. Now, one of the applications of that is they are then able to better segment the kind of customers out there. So when they start, so if you want to work on a specific feature, you now have all these segments, you can simply pick up the relevant segment. This requires AI/ML. Now, this application can be there in clinical science as well, which is that in clinical research, a lot of the patient recruitment, a lot of patient selection requires a lot of work on parameters which are biological in nature, social, therapeutic. Use AI you can actually help the patient recruitment better. So this is the large case study. The smaller one, specific one, someone said imaging. We've invested in a startup called Brainsight. It's a Bangalore-based startup. They may have reached out to you as well because you're in Bangalore. So these girls have basically set up a, so it's a solution based on the connectomes that you showed out there. So they call them connectomes. And the way it works is you look at those patterns of connectomes, which is basically connection between different neurons, different areas in the brain. And then you use this to preempt dementia, Alzheimer's. The modality they're currently using is functional MRI, so fMRI, it's on the costlier side. But now they're working on fMRI getting correlated with biomarkers. This is where a lot of work can be done. So in neuroimaging, you look at the entire set of data, imaging data coming in, you can use it to preempt disorders. So that's a large case study and a small. I'll leave it to the panelists now to add their points as well.
Yeah, so to go back to what you said, somebody said image processing, which is a very big area in ophthalmology and neuro-ophthalmology. Part of it Ambuj covered. Why this is important? I think more importantly, you know that what area you can work on. But why that is important? How does it translate for us, and how does it translate for the society? Now there are tests called OCT that we do in ophthalmology and neuro-ophthalmology, where we look at again the back portion of the eye, and we are able to treat disorders of the eye, and some of the time we can use it as a marker for Alzheimer's or Parkinsonism. Now to diagnose and analyze those images require a particular expertise, and that's not available. Anyway, we have a shortage of doctors in India. On top of it, we have a shortage of specialists. And on top of it, we have a shortage of super specialists who can do some of these work. Now, if enough data is given to you and you can form a pattern and say that this is how, if these data points are available, this particular image denotes this problem. So screening is a major issue. So you can't go to every village and maybe diagnose accurately, but you can say that there is a 90% chance that you're okay, or there is a 90% chance that you're not okay, go to the hospital and get it checked. So image processing and data has a huge implication as far as the society or the way we practice, because then a doctor doesn't have to go to village to look at the eye and say whether there's a cataract or there's a retinal problem. The image analysis in the village is doing, and now they filter out patients to say, okay, you need to go and meet a doctor, you seem to be fine, and you can have a checkup after 6 months.
So one big issue, like I told, that majority of the clinical studies in biomedical science are false positive. Now, one other the solution to this is doing large studies, like big clinical trials, which are, you have randomized double-blind studies and all, where the element of bias in it is reduced. And there are multiple data collection from multiple centers, and there is an independent data monitoring centers. Now, still there are instances in which with large clinical trials, like in stroke itself. 2013 there were 3 clinical trials, big studies run across multiple centers, all negative. So there is a comparing endovascular intervention. Like an endovascular intervention means you remove clot, use an angioplasty from the brain. If you have a stroke, if a stroke means there's a block in the blood vessel. So you use a kind of a angioplasty-like device to remove the clot from the brain. And that was a study that was compared with the standard treatment, medical treatment. So these trials, about 3 trials done across the world was negative. And the reason was that, so once these studies were negative, the practice of doing thrombectomy, that clot removal, completely stopped across the world. Now, what happened is that then subsequently there was another study from Netherlands where that study, the same topic, that study was positive. So then people start to look why the initial 3 studies was negative and this second study become positive. So and we also published on this, what was the thing is that these 3 studies, there's a huge amount of heterogeneity, in the sense that they use different types of devices, different type of population was, so when you have a lot of heterogeneity in the intervention as well as the patient population, the studies may become negative, because there's a lot of subgroups who behave differently. So to get a positive result, you need to have a homogeneous cohort cohort of patients. So this homogeneity of a clinical study is very important. In here, so the importance of pattern recognition in AI. So to make something homogeneous, you need to, suppose you have a stroke. Stroke can be because of, can have paralysis. That can be because of lesion in different areas of brain. You can have basal ganglia lesion, you can have an internal capsule lesion, you have the cortex lesion. So what happened, all cause the end result same. So, but what happened, the deficit is maximum. So then all look like, but on the contrary, you have to map these patients imaging wise or volumetrically, means the volume of brain tissue, where is the lesion, and then you do a homogeneous study. And you make a homogeneous cohort and then study these patients, then that study is powered to give positive result than those studies which are not, you're doing a kind of like kachara. Everything is put together and you're doing study. That study won't be powered to give a positive results. So that's a major issue when you look at two biological studies. And one of the major reason when large clinical trials become neutral.
So all of you who have expertise or working on AI and ML must have taken off 2 or 3 words from this. What was it? Large data, bias in data, seed that you use. Anything else? Homogeneity of the data. Excellent. Right? Very important. So this leads to like almost, what is the timing? Up to 4. Okay. So the last round of questions, more from if the students would ask this question or if they can interrupt. Yes.
Actually, my question is about connected to brain. I have 2 questions. First one is, actually everyone gets dreams. The beautiful dreams are get only in the early morning. And the scary dreams are at 2 o'clock. I mean, no major. Why don't we in the midnight and night?
Okay.
Maybe the scary dream should be morning. Why and how? And
So,
not the beautiful dreams in midnight.
Professor Bapi, you want to take that question on dreams? You can answer.
So essentially, dreaming, there are two different distinct stages of sleep. NREM sleep and REM sleep. NREM sleep, the eye will move very rapidly. It is almost like an alert stage. Only that your body muscle tone, muscle and all become atonic. Muscle won't move. That is a time in which you dream. And that REM sleep occur towards the later stage of sleep. Like in the early stage, it will be predominantly NREM. And later stage, when maybe 6 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning, you have plenty of REM sleep. And this is the time you have vivid dreams. You could recollect the dreams. In fact, but when you are dreaming, you won't be able to enact it. Maybe you see something. Your muscle will be atonic. Muscle will be completely paralyzed, and you have a vivid dreaming. And that is manifested by rapid eye movement during that part of the sleep. So that's the reason why you dream more often towards the end of the sleep.
So I think the question was why good dreams in the late night and bad dreams in the morning.
That actually, good dreams, I don't know what do you mean by good dreams. Usually you recollect dreams during REM sleep. Other good dreams, I don't know whether you recollect. NREM sleep dreams, you don't recollect. So these, maybe you are recollecting these dreams which is happening in the later part of the sleep.
And my second question is, at a particular situation, it feels like it's already been happened in the past.
Deja vu. Deja vu.
That is essentially, basically there is some particular part of the brain which is activated, that kind of feeling you get. Even in epilepsy, that particular part of the brain is activated, you feel that something has happened, something is familiar to you. So that's a natural neurobiological phenomenon. That doesn't happen because the particular part of the brain is activated.
There's, yeah.
I couldn't understand the question.
What? He says is that the concept of an apple, a red apple against a green apple. So I see a red apple, I know it's a red apple, but I see a green color apple, but I still know it's an apple. So how do I build this construct?
This the construct of the whether it is apple. Apple is okay. So this. Huh.
But when I show a green apple, it will also say that is an apple.
Huh. Actually, there are different areas in the brain which construct. So you have a occipital lobe which can get just a perception, the sensation of this thing. And there is something anterior to that, so front of that, it's called a visual association area, where you have the constructs is first made. You have a three-dimensional shape. And then there is another area which adds color to it. So the construction of the apple is already made by an area which is called visual association area, and then there will be color added to it. So the construction is already made. So and there is another area which recognizes color. So there are different areas. The apple is recognized by something, and the color is recognized by another area, and then all combined together, and you have a construct of a red apple and a green apple. So different areas of brain construct the concept of apple, and then there is another area which gives color to that.
Have you ever thought of who taught you that an apple is red in color and they can...
Learning.
No, I'm asking a more fundamental question. The fact that an apple can be red or green, when do you learn it? When you're very small. A for apple, and they show a red color apple. Right? All our books. Actually, children don't know. I have seen this with one child in a grocery shop. The mother is showing an apple which is red in color, and she says apple. And then she doesn't show the green color. There's green apples also, right? She doesn't show that and say it's an apple. So, I was itching, and I was saying, no, I should explain it. And I went and told the mother, please explain that this is also an apple. So she said he'll get confused. Because in the book, A for apple, and it's a red color apple. Right? So it's also something that is coded. That's because it's learned like that.
Acquired.
It's an acquired, just like how will you train an algorithm to recognize an apple? In recognition? What do you do? What are the features you extract? Okay, so if I don't have lights, then the camera will not know what it is? No. Can human eye see without light? No. So if suppose you're going to build a better system than the human system as an AI system, what will you do? To recognize it's an apple. You'll put in light? Okay. Okay. So, it's a good question. Any other questions? Yes, last.
Melatonin, the role of melatonin in sleeper. Okay, melatonin actually, determines the circadian rhythm. As the day progresses, the melatonin level increases, and by 8 o'clock in the night, the melatonin level peaks. And that is a time when you have the maximum sleep pressure, and it switches you to get to sleep. Pardon? If you give melatonin in daytime, it will be produced, but the maximum is produced at 8 o'clock in the evening.
I have a question. That is, when we say medicines are needed, the cost of medicine, discarding medicine, why is it that we are focusing only on drugs? For instance, if a person is sleep deprived, you put me in a machine learning class, I will take a class and I put him to sleep in 10 minutes. I don't need a medicine.
Brilliant, sir.
Plus, there is also certain kind of perceptions like music, which can entertain, and the brain is connected to all kinds of senses in the body. So music will change the behavior, it can trigger the
We don't, we shouldn't. The reason why I was holding my, in fact, there was this previous question coming from this gentleman. I don't know your name, but you had an interesting question about deja vu, and I almost restrained myself from answering because I could see your expressions. So I kind of know that you still have that question lingering in your mind. And the answer is to be found if you start differentiating between the brain and the mind. This is a question for the mind also. Now what will happen typically is in modern science, modern medicine, in which all three of us have been trained, we have certain models that we explain medical phenomena on. And these are predominantly very strongly structural in nature, and the intervention is predominantly chemical in nature. However, this is changing. So now you have different sets of interventions coming in. So it's not just chemical, there's a biological angle. There's an electrophysiological angle. There is also a behavioral intervention angle. And so we call these the dimensions of therapy. Neuroscience is a beautiful area because it combines, it has room for all these dimensions of therapy. So I agree with you, music therapy has its role. In fact, the entire psychotherapy, 70% of the entire psychotherapy is all about just subjective assessment and then intervening from the point of view of using certain imageries, imageries, visualizations, affirmations, tagging, anchoring, and the entire process only works along those lines. So I agree with you. The more we focus only on the chemical part of it, we create a lot of side effects and complications, which in the long run can, and the medical industry, at least I can speak from the med device and the pharma side, where I work extensively with, they are thinking along these lines. So there's a big component of digital therapeutics coming in, which is that can you use software as a medical device and say, can you effect behavior modification? And we were talking about healthcare content becoming big. That is one more area which could, so I completely agree with you, sir, and we are working on it.
So now a lot of diseases are being grouped as lifestyle disorders. Initially it was called as disease like, let's say in the eye, glaucoma is high pressure in the eye, and you'll start medication as soon as you find a high pressure, but now that also has been clubbed as a lifestyle disease where you also look at modifying a factor, the way you lead your life, and see if the disease can be prevented.
Actually, the drug is a thing which can be easily marketed. That's one reason why drugs are more. Pharmacy industry generally market drugs, but the efficacy of drugs, essentially everything is mediated through neurochemistry. So what happens is that a drug substitutes that, what is happening in the brain. If the behavioral approach also is mediated through this neurochemistry. So essentially is a neurochemical manipulation, which, how effective it is. Now suppose drugs are, you're delivering that chemical in a very high concentration. So, and that is marketable as well.
One angle that I want your students to, the students out here to also kind of appreciate is that, and building in from what you said, sir, so there is a lot of focus now on non-allopathic interventions as well, including Ayush therapy. Just yesterday we had a news, New York Street raised 12 million. So, they're up there. So my point is, and so a lot of these interventions are interesting because a lot of what modern science and modern medicine is, allopathy is part of modern science. We have a reductionist approach, which is that you look at the entire set of solutions out there, and then you start zeroing down. So this concept of active pharmaceutical ingredient, is that I have a willow bark, but I will extract salicylate and make acetylsalicylic acid, which is aspirin, right? That's the modern science approach, and it's rooted in the philosophy of modern science. If you look at Ayurveda, they have a very expansionist approach. They have a very comprehensive approach, which is that they don't look at a patient only from the point of view of a chemical disturbance, but they will look at other aspects. There are some pros and cons from both the side. There is now a move, and again, I'm talking in terms of startups because, so there is another startup called Nadi Pulse. They focus on Nadi Pariksha. But now they've combined Nadi Pariksha with vital parameters. And then right now as we speak, again, they are invested into by Rich, and so we've kind of invested in them. And so I mentor them. They're building correlative they're building entire algorithms to, and so can you combine Nadi Pariksha parameters, which is a biophysical profile actually in a way, along with vitals, and then arrive at meaningful insights. I think that is where the future will be.
But here I have to a word of caution. This may overflow to pseudoscience also.
Yeah. There is always a
There's
risk.
a very thin line between science and pseudoscience, and
Yeah.
many times. And in fact, what I understand with the story of this dosi, they just marketed it and they made money, and finally they really got money via contactless device.
Via?
They connected into
Yeah.
oximeter.
Yeah.
They marketed it as a contactless device, but really they made money making it contactful.
Beautiful. Here's the other point. So typically, so we're looking at the intersection of medical science and technology, engineering science. Medical science, the first dictum as a doctor in med school that we have taught is primum non nocere. First, do no harm. That is how we are trained. So the risk-taking appetite for the medical profession, therefore, is theoretically at least constrained because there is a life at stake. Engineers, on the other hand, you start look at the entire, you look at agile methodologies, you build fast, fail fast, iterate, move ahead. Build fast, fail fast, iterate, move ahead. So the risk-taking appetites within these two disciplines are very different. You will find a typical dilemma when you look at data management in healthcare. HIPAA compliance. A lot of people said HIPAA needs to be everywhere, you need to be more stringent. Now there is a school of thought which is saying too much of HIPAA is actually impeding research. So there will be these different schools of thought. It will be interesting for you. The world ahead is going to be very interesting for you, and you will find these sort of dilemmas to face as well. You're going to have a good ride ahead.
So in the interest of time, I also want to actually add to more than the clinical neuroscience. I think there's a lot of research and a lot of interest that all of you can, some of you can be interested in, to look at some of the, from the cognitive science aspects of it. I just mentioned language. How many of you know any myths in neuroscience? Like something that you must have heard? Anything to do with gender? Girls have less brains? Huh? Yeah, so is that a myth or reality? Does size actually mean more cognition? So elephants should by now be building rockets, right? So there are a lot of myths. There's a lot of other things that actually would, as engineers, if you don't understand this aspect of it, and if your AI is based on mimicking what the human brain thinks, then your biases would also be getting into the algorithms that you design, yes? So any one of you who will be interested in working in neuroscience aspects like clinical neuroscience, or all the doctors on the panel mentioned very interesting problem statements that some of you can address, should also understand the clinical side of it. That's one thing that he mentioned, why do false positives come in, is because all of us, even if we are engineers, we have to understand some aspects of clinical. It's not just, at the end of the day, we all can just say it's signals for us, or it's just ones and zeros for us. But we also should understand the clinical aspects of it, okay? So I think we have run out of time. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yes, you have one question.
So Alzheimer's is a particular type of dementia. So dementia is a broad group when there is a significant memory impairment and there is a occupational loss, social loss and all. The memory loss significant enough to cause occupational impairment, social impairment, while Alzheimer's is a particular type of dementia. So So you have different types of dementia. You have frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia. Of this, Alzheimer's is the predominant cause of dementia. So the subset, dementia is Alzheimer's is a subset of dementia. And amnesia is essentially, you just have is a phenomenon, memory loss. It is not a disease, it's a phenomenon. Memory loss, it means, amnesia means you are forgetting something. Yeah, yes, exactly. Amnesia can be because of so many causes. It can be a temporary phenomenon also. But dementia is a kind of a progressive condition, while Alzheimer's is a subset of that. It's a particular disease.
Yeah.
Cloudiness of?
Brain fog. Is it the same as brain fog? The brain fog that people talk about. Brain fog.
She feels that she is. I think you want to.
So the phenomenon works at multiple levels. Let's simplify it for you. So the way it works is, and that's why that entire concept of mind comes in, because now we're not talking only about the conscious brain, we're also talking about subconscious and superconscious, depending on which philosophy you want to follow. As humans, we have this ability to be conscious of our own thinking. We don't know whether it exists in other animals. We haven't tested it out, but at least we are confident that we can do that. Now, when you start observing yourself and your thinking process, it is said that, and for this you also need to get into, so I'm not going to give you all the answers but you can get into the science of meditation as well. And you will see that, as long as, your brain is thinking at a particular level, at a particular frequency, usually the awake frequency, you're doing a conscious effort. There are times when you start to observe your own self. A tiny part of your brain observes. Now, if you ask me what's the structural part within the brain which does that, there are conflicting researches all across. However, when you do that, there are times when you will see there are just too many impulses, too many signals, too many thought processes going out there, and they're trying to go through some narrow channels because, in a sense, brain also works on patterns, right? So there's a particular way of thinking that you have. There'll be a particular tract, a neuronal tract, which will therefore be a neuronal loop, for example, which will get activated, and that will become your structural reality, which will lead to functional and therefore behavior reality, right? And so therefore, sometimes there is a barrage of thoughts coming for multiple reasons. Of that, about 10% would be useful, 90% would be not useful. They are just stressing out. But they still want to go through that specific tract. It's narrow for them, and that's when you start to get confused. You call it clouding, you call it fogging, call it confusion. There are multiple ways to look at it. But this is an area between neuroscience and psychology, and so therefore, it would be great if you can. So one of the things they say in meditation is, you're too agitated. You just look at yourself, observe yourself, and over a period of time, it reduces down. See, one of the reasons why actually I've moved into Vedic sciences, I read a lot of Vedic sciences and a lot of quantum physics, and you find a lot of answers there as well. So your deja vu has an interesting explanation in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You might want to read a little bit of quantum physics with that, and you'll probably get some insights. For you, it could be an interesting blend between what you're looking at from Vedic sciences. We look at how you observe yourself, who then you are, and then you start correlating it with what you have as a question in neurosciences. I know I've given you some really gray areas to follow. You might want to research. We can connect later.
So, the interest of time, I think we should stop, but I would also like to tell many of you were actually having parallel conversations with your friends. So if I give a quiz now, many of you would not be able to pass. But if you had built an AI system which can do this, it would pass. Why? So you were all talking to each other, some of you. So what happened when you were talking to your friends? You're not paying attention. Suppose you were building an AI system, what would you endow it with? Ability to do multiple processing, right? So it applies even to neuroscience. What we want to do is, we want to get 360-degree data. We want it to be parallelly processed. We want all the diagnosis to be done faster, quicker, and real life. Okay? That which the human cannot. I showed you I showed you this. Okay? This is not something that a human brain can actually do this indexing so fast. So this is something that can be built and can be done and can only be done if it's got a fast parallel system. That which humans can't. So if I give you a quiz now, I think 50% of the class would fail. Yes? You want to bet? You'll take the quiz? Yes? Okay. No, I don't want to correct any more than what I have to correct for the enzymes. So thank you, and thanks to the organizers for the opportunity. Thanks to the panelists. Actually, they gave you a lot more knowledge about your brain and neuroscience than at the data part. So consultation fees is waived for now, but any other further consultancies can be on pay basis outside, and I take a commission. Okay, thank you.